Welcome to today's edition of Severe Thunderstorm Outlooks. There are a lot of outlooks over the next couple of days. But why do we have so many severe weather possibilities over the next week? I'll talk a little bit about it. I'm meteorologist Ted Keller. Let's take a look at the outlooks. Well, the overall pattern is a jet stream flow which features a trough of low pressure. That's where the arrows start down there in the southwest and move up to the northeast across the central and sometimes the eastern U.S. as well. And then the moisture is something that comes up from the Gulf. It's a very important feature for why the United States is the center of severe weather for the world, because we have this unique combination of moisture, which implies unstable air, coming up from that Gulf, which kind of juts westward, and then the jet stream. If it can establish a constant flow over several days, that's a favorable condition. Now all we have to do is work out all the minute details of each possible day. Having said all that, let's take a look backwards a little bit. I just want to verify yesterday's forecast. The Storm Prediction Center did a pretty good job. This was their forecast for Thursday with that level 2 right in here in northern and northeastern Kansas, small sliver of Nebraska. We'll check the verification of severe weather reports. Pretty accurate, mostly hail, and that's, I think, one of the things that was being emphasized, really. 1-inch hail, like this report here, is considered severe. We had a couple, at least one there of 2-inch hail. In north central Kansas. More hail back here along the tail of that outlook, and some severe wind gusts around the Kansas City area kind of rounds that out. Now let's take a look at today. Not a real big chance of severe weather. This elongated area here east-west right along the Kansas-Oklahoma border has been very consistently outlined. This is new. This is a little disturbance in the upper atmosphere that might excite some of the storms up there in Nevada and parts of California, and even Idaho and Oregon. This is primarily going to be a hail risk here. Let's take a look at how CSU is breaking that down. And sure enough, they've got a slight, 5% risk of large hail in that area and points north. Wind, not so much. They do have a little tiny bullseye of tornado there, but it's not really the kind of situation that favors tornadoes. This is all activity north of a front. Usually that's a hail-producing situation, maybe gusty winds occasionally. Now let's fast forward to Saturday here, and we have this has been pretty consistent too, a level 2 out of 5 down there in West Texas, and a pretty large area of just kind of a marginal risk for severe weather that goes all the way north into Nebraska. Now, there is some tornado risk with this, and it's divided into two parts, and both of these really are connected to what the jet stream is doing. And so if you have a stronger disturbance or something that can modify, especially the surface winds, to bring them so that they provide more curvature in the lower part of the atmosphere, that tends to help the tornado risk a little bit. So that's happening here, and it's happening here. Now, this is only a 2% chance, and it is 2 days out, so we'll let that ride and see what happens. But it is interesting that CSU's learning machine model does put that risk in there. And if you look really close, there's a little blip down there in Texas. Hail risk, just kind of a broad brush. Wind risk is really maximized in that same area, basically, as the tornado risk. If we look at Saturday's 500 millibar flow, this is the NAM. You'll see there's a little disturbance right here, a little kink in the flow, and a little wind maximum. Same can be said for this area here. There might be a couple of short waves. There's this one, which I don't know. This is, I think I snapped the 18Z, maybe the 21Z, so that'd be 4 o'clock in the afternoon. There's also maybe a little disturbance here. They're not sure, basically, so whatever ends up happening here, I think is going to enhance this slight tornado risk up in this area. Now, what about Sunday? Things kicking in a little bit more. Remember what we talked about, that jet stream flow is really getting a little more serious now. And so we have a level 2 from south central Kansas straight down into the heart of Texas. And the severe weather risk now reaches all the way up to Minneapolis, and there could be something to that. And in fact, up in that area, it's always, in this particular situation, a fight between favorable winds and can enough unstable air, that moisture we talked about, get up there, and those two combine to produce a favorable condition for not just severe thunderstorms, but also the tornadic part. So yeah, it does kind of emphasize that area up there as being a 2% risk, not real great at this point, but this is 3 days away. To hail risk pretty high there, and the wind risk just kind of broad brush from the Great Lakes all the way down to Texas. So if you look at Sunday's NAM model, again, I think I grabbed the 4 o'clock 500 millibar flow. So this is getting a little more serious out here. That'll fast forward to Monday. Sunday's flow is interesting because we have what I would call patchy areas of wind. Like you really want these winds to be maximized here. So that is true, but then this doesn't match up real close with where the instability is. Still, though, I do think that the areas outlined by the SPC is probably the best bet we have this many days out to trying to figure out where the maximum for severe weather will be. Now, we'll go to Monday, and now we have a long area that goes from Minneapolis all the way down to north central Texas. Includes Oklahoma City, Kansas City, Des Moines, Minneapolis, Wichita, some of the bigger cities in there, Omaha. And so that is the risk for Monday. CSU agrees for the most part. They extend the risk more down to Oklahoma and Texas, whereas CSU's learning machine tends to keep it up in the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes states. Again, this is all going to be which of these models can get a better grip on these upper level winds. So here's the EPS now. I changed over to the longer range ensemble model. We still have the maximum core winds coming in on Monday, and then we have a ridge of high pressure here, which I think is interesting. I don't know if that's going to deter severe weather in this area or not. But these increasing winds over the plains may have an effect on overnight convection Monday night into Tuesday. So speaking of Tuesday, we'll go ahead and look at that now. And this is a little bit different. And the next map I'll show you is very interesting. So they really have a large area now that extends from the Great Lakes states all the way down through Kansas City, Oklahoma City to areas west of and including Dallas for Tuesday. Now look at this. This machine goes back in the past and looks for analogs. In other words, when the jet stream looked like this and the moisture looked like this, what happened in the past? And so they've got a really highly targeted area. I'm kind of surprised here. 30% probabilities in Illinois, Iowa, parts of Missouri, and also into southern Wisconsin. I think that's interesting. Very interesting, and it's in the heart of this new kind of bulged out area that has appeared on that forecast. Let's look at the 500 millibar flow. So we have a broad flow. This is probably the way it's shaping up now to be the most favorable widespread severe weather situation that I think we can put together, maybe only rivaled by the next day, Wednesday. Let's take a look at that. So that's looking like, pretty good risk from Chicago, almost all of Illinois, almost all of Missouri, all the way down to Dallas. Kind of repeating the same pattern. Again, what I talked about earlier, that jet stream flow is kind of in a kind of a repeating pattern where it's going to take days and days and days for the overall pattern to change. Meanwhile, we have little disturbances flowing through all this. Now, at this distance, as CSU is putting the maximum way up in New York State and kind of dragging that behind, and you can compare that to the SPC outlook. And then finally, on Wednesday's jet stream flow, this trough is what we call a more positively tilted trough, sorry. And so while this does support severe weather, the overall bulk wind structure that can support a supercell is there. It does kind of take away a little bit from the tornadic potential, but again, this many days out, little tiny things can make a big difference. And then on Thursday, the last thing we'll look at for the CSU model here, even though SPC doesn't outline anything, there is still this kind of broad area in the central and northern U.S. So we'll take a look at the NIU forecast, April 10th through the 16th. That pretty much recaps everything I just showed you and does so pretty well. Corridor from Texas up to Wisconsin and all points on the side. Then we start with the 17th through the 23rd. And that has kind of shrunk the area back down to Texas. And then on the 24th through the 30th, a big increase again in basically the severe weather belt that you might expect in April. Thanks for watching today's edition of Severe Thunderstorm Outlooks. This is published every day after the morning Storm Prediction Center update. Also, remember to check that site off on day one because they update it fairly frequently. If you like this video, please like it. Also, you can subscribe to the channel for more content just like this.